everybody, Larissa here from Beekeeping Made Simple, and this video is about the honey label and a little bit about the jars too. Now, I had someone ask if I could send them feedback on their label, and which I will be getting back to you soon if you are watching this video. I was a graphic designer. I went to school for graphic design. So what my bachelor's degree is in, and did that for many years and still do it a little bit. So for the honey label, you have the things you have to have on there, and that you have to go look on your county website. Most likely it's the net weight, which is in ounces and grams, your name. For here in Hawaii, it's you have to have the date it was bottled on, which is silly, but you do. I have been told that it's actually the date that you pour the honey from your bucket into the jar, not the date that you actually harvested the honey. But I usually just put the date that I harvested the honey and your address and phone number. So there's the logistics, like the specific things that your county or state requires, and those things you have to look up. I believe it's statewide. But then beyond that, one thing I found that people always ask about. Now, I did work in a honey, they called it a honey museum. It was mostly a store, but then we had like 10 live beehives that we did tours. And so I had talked to a lot of people about honey and bees for a few years. And big question people always wanted to know was, what kind of honey is it? What does it taste like? So even though you don't have to put the kind of honey it is, now the place I worked at, they had varietals. They had the Christmas berry, the Macnut, and the Lehua, and they moved their bees for these different blooming seasons. I keep my bees in one spot because that's a lot of work, and I don't have a forklift, and that's not what I'm going to be doing. It's hard enough finding one spot for all my bees, much less a different spot during the different times of the year. So what I do is I do a spring harvest and I do a fall harvest because I don't really get much actually for the summertime. It's kind of like a February, March. And then I also have a kiave, which is the mesquite honey, but here in Hawaii they call it kiave. And you know it's real kiave because it's white. Kind of tastes like vanilla icing. So I strongly recommend having what kind of honey it is. Even if you're just calling it spring or fall or whatever. I don't recommend, like just putting honey on your label and letting people figure out what it tastes like. And also what I have, so this is my honey label. And I'll get to like how I print out the labels and stuff. But I have in the front, I'll pull it off and put it on the jar for you. I use the hex jars. And while I'm putting this label on, Michael's asking if I use horizontal hives and if I like them. My first couple of years with bees, I had horizontal hives, and I then went to a farm and worked with Langstroth strictly, and I will never use a top bar hive ever again. The Langstroth hives I found incredibly, hell of a lot easier. And I don't recommend it to beginners because I found it really tricky to find information for the horizontal hives, and it's a lot easier to find information about Langstroths, but they're not bad. They're just not my preference. So here on the front, I have 100% raw Hawaiian because that's a common thing that people want, like that they like. And it's good for you when thinking of your honey label to think of at least one thing that makes your honey something that people are going to want, whether it's raw, which is probably the case for you. So put that 100% raw. People like that and look for it. You might think it's assumed, but not everybody assumes that the honey is raw. People like here is Hawaii, so people like that it's Hawaiian honey or tropical honey. So that's something I put on there. This is a jar of comb honey, it has a piece of comb inside. So then I'll put that on the front. And for you, it might be something different. It might be the varietal that makes it special. There might not be anything special about it. You might be selling it really cheap. And so maybe you're going to make your label look or label be cheaper label so that people see a cheap label and they're going to assume that that's the cheapest honey on the shelf and maybe not even price check with the other things. And I have the weight, and keep in mind that the weight of honey is heavier than water. So if you have an 8-ounce jar, it's probably 9 ounces of honey. So you do want to weigh that, and then the grams. So then on either side, I just have a little illustration of some bees and the waves because I am focusing on it being Hawaiian honey. And then the one panel, I have our name, our website, an Instagram, logo and our Instagram name, our phone number, and our address. And that's required by the state of Hawaii. As well as do not feed honey to infants under 1 year. This product is home produced and processed. And that is for this honey now that I don't sell online and have the certified kitchen, and then the bottled on date. But on one panel, I do have flavor, and I have this honey is sweet and rich with fruity undertones. It's delicious, dribbled over pancakes and waffles or in a peanut butter sandwich. And that's because I've talked to people who have bought my honey, who have constantly come back to me and asked for more. And ask them how they use the honey and what they like about it. And that's really helped me a lot to figure out what to focus on. Because when I hear someone else talking about the honey, and then one guy was like, "Oh, it's so good. You put it on warm toast with some peanut butter." And he was like making me want to try the honey. And then I was like, "Oh, wait, it's mine. I know what it tastes like." And then that made me figure out what to put on the label to entice people to want it. And that's specifically if you're going to be selling this in stores when you're not going to be standing there handing it to people. And, or even at a market, you're not going to be telling everybody what to do with your honey. So it's helpful to have that stuff. So now the one person sent me their honey label that was just black and a white background. And they said that they didn't want to put any color in it. And that's fine. You don't have to put color on your honey label. There are some really popular, nice looking labels that are just one color, but they are a clear label or they are screen printed on the jar. And when they're screen printed on the jar, that is really nice. And that's something you're going to be doing off the bat because that's way too much money and requires buying a lot of jars. But you can buy clear labels and print on them, print black on them. And that's what I was going to recommend to this person is printing black on the label, especially if they have a light colored honey or their honey is already crystallized and so lightens up quite a bit, because that makes a one color label look really fancy as opposed to if it was just on a white label. Now, if you want to sell your honey for really cheap, then make it a one color cheap looking label, because people see a label that's fancy, they're going to assume that it costs a lot of money. Okay, so I buy label paper right here from onlinelabels.com. Now, for things that I have like a huge amount of, I get them professionally done on rolls. But for smaller amounts or for things you're just trying out, if you're just starting out selling your honey, onlinelabels.com has great label paper. This is water resistant. You can wash this jar and this label still looks great. It's got a nice glossy look to it, which looks good on glass because the glass is shiny also. And it comes in like so many different sizes. I have the long band. I chose the really skinny one because I have comb in this one. You might want the fatter band, or you can get the square ones, which I have for my honeycomb boxes. And they have the clear ones. They have them in LaserJet and inkjet printers. So you can bring it to Staples or Office Max too and have them print it. I did the math. It is a lot cheaper to print your labels. I bought a cheap Epson printer, and even with the cost of the ink and the label paper, it is so much cheaper to print at home. And especially if you just need to do some really fast at the last minute, it's a lot better to just print it on your own than to go to a copy shop or to even have them printed at like Vistaprint or something until you're getting to the point that you're getting like rolls and rolls of like, thousands of labels. Then it might be cheaper. And the main reason is because like this label doesn't have a lot of ink on it. It's mostly white. If you were printing like pictures and postcards and stuff, then yeah, go get that printed because that's a lot of ink coverage. But this is not a lot of ink coverage. A lot of it's white. Unless you're printing like a solid black label or something, you just do it on your home printer. And I found it a lot easier, especially when someone contacts you with a last minute order and you just need to go get it done, or you just have 2 more jars and you don't have any more labels. Now, the farm I used to work for, Big Island Bees, they have their label and they hired an illustrator. And it looks really nice and it's a beautiful label. And they get people that want to sell their honey in their stores to contact them. And a big reason why is because they have a nice label. But keep in mind, this was not their first label. And this cost them a lot of money. And this is something you maybe work towards, but it isn't something that you want to start out with, is trying to make your label so amazing and wonderful. And then, of course, there's the jars. I went with the hex jar because I thought it showed off the honeycomb really nicely. And also, this is really great for shipping. The canning jars break really easily in shipping, I found, or at least here, anytime I'm shipping out of state, it's going on a plane and they just break. These pack in really nicely, really well together. You can fit a lot in a box. And I prefer the glass because they have a wide mouth and you can heat them up in the microwave or in a bowl of hot water. I know you're not supposed to put honey in the microwave, but come on, you have to acknowledge that people are going to do that and give them what they want. You can put a spoon in this jar easily, and those little squeezy bottles with the bears are really cute, but you can't put that in, or you shouldn't put that in the microwave, and you can't really get a spoon in there and really scoop much out unless you have one of those little baby spoons or something. So, I really recommend before you even make the label, just real fast, think about like what you want your honey to be. Do you want it to look a little bit fancier and maybe have a little bit higher price point? Or do you want it to be on par with everybody else or a little bit cheaper and you want to go with a cheaper looking label? Do you want to have it be like a single blossom honey or some specific kind of honey that you're telling people what flower this honey comes from? Or is it just going to be a generic honey? If it's from a specific flower, then that's maybe what you would focus your label on. If you're in a fancy location like here in Hawaii, or the guy that sells honey from the rooftops of the hives in Manhattan, or places like that, then maybe you're going for, or even the people that sell their, I think they call it killer bee honey, and they're in Texas and they sell honey from their Africanized bees. That's their thing that they're doing. Maybe it's the comb honey. If it's not, and you don't really have anything going for you, you just want a general label, then I wouldn't go too fancy with it and just make sure that you're telling people what this stuff tastes like, because they won't know and they're going to want to know. So that are my suggestions for you. Feel free to leave comments and down below asking me about maybe things you're having trouble with your honey label. And if you appreciate these videos, I hope you subscribe or like or leave a comment, because actually all those things is what helps me make money off YouTube. And helps me, find the time to go do this again if I am making a couple dollars off of each of these videos. So, thanks. Have a great whatever day this is, Thursday. Aloha.